Hello everyone! A while back when I reviewed Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, I said that I intended to talk a little bit about the adaptations. That was a few months ago now, so I do apologize to anyone who has been waiting for me to do that. Today we're going to talk about the novel's first major film adaptation, the 1940 version starring Greer Garson as Elizabeth Bennet and Laurence Olivier as Mr. Darcy. Both Garson and Olivier were known for how beautifully they could speak the English language, so they were very good choices for a story in which dialogue is so heavily featured. Garson, though in her mid-30s, a trifle old for the part of 20-year-old Elizabeth Bennet, is no less lovely than she always was. Nobody talks or looks quite like her, and she has an appealing habit of floating effortlessly through a scene. Actually, everybody seems to float and flit around in this movie. There's a lot of extraneous movement as actors dance in and out of frame, sometimes literally. There's a lot of theatrical gesturing as well, very graceful, but a little unusual. All this movement does help show off the very detailed, very anachronistic gowns designed by Adrian. Anyway, Garson's Lizzie Bennet is pleasantly vibrant, though I don't see as much of her laughing as I do her saying witty things to make other people laugh. Meanwhile, Olivier's Darcy is soft-spoken, mild-mannered, and seems easily wounded by Lizzie's zingers. I don't really have any complaints with Olivier's performance, but I do think the character was written a little too open and friendly. He's extremely snobby, but except for his initial "she is tolerable, I suppose, but not handsome enough to tempt me," he's often quite enthusiastic and attentive toward Elizabeth. It's strange behavior when you compare it to other Darcys. I believe this was only my second or third time seeing this movie all the way through. It's an entertaining, bubbly comedy, but it's not a huge favorite of mine. For one thing, it's just so silly. There are a lot of comedic scenes added in, and some of Austen's more serious scenes taken out, with most characters exaggerated to an extreme degree. Some of these characters, like Mary Bennet and Colonel Fitzwilliam, are much goofier than I would expect. The movie does have an excellent supporting cast, though, a nice sampling of talent from the era, and I do enjoy a lot of these performances, Edmund Gwen's Mr. Bennet, and Mary Boland's Mrs. Bennet, though she's very over the top. Frida Inniscourt, who I'm not very familiar with, does an especially good job as Caroline Bingley, and Edna May Oliver, one of the best character actresses of her time, pulls off a memorable Lady Catherine. But the pacing of the whole movie always strikes me as a little off. There's a lot of time spent on extra things that were added in that don't move the story forward, and then all of a sudden, around the 80-minute mark, things start to move really fast. I think the best example I can give those of you who are familiar with the story of how rushed this is that Darcy's first proposal occurs not at the halfway mark, but 2/3 into the story, and then it's immediately followed by news of Lydia's elopement. What? There are also a lot of changes to the original story, surprise, surprise. One noteworthy, pretty entertaining change, I think, is that Darcy and Elizabeth's dance at the Netherfield Ball is swapped out for an archery match at the Netherfield Garden Party. Darcy tries to play the oldest trick in the book by saying, let me teach you how to shoot a bow and arrow, but then Elizabeth schools him. It's different from the dance, and much less aggressive on Elizabeth's part, but it is fun. I think this was my favorite scene when I saw this when I was younger. This Elizabeth definitely strikes me as a little more favorably disposed toward Darcy than she usually is, at least it seems that way. At the garden party, they spend quite a bit of time together, and they're quite amicable, and almost form a truce. Either she's more forgiving here than usual, or she's just really good at faking friendliness. No wonder he thinks she's going to accept his proposal. Darcy, unfortunately, doesn't get to be quite as heroic in this version. Instead of rushing off immediately to track down Wickham, he goes home to hang out with the Bingleys. I think it's only after he finds out that Mr. Bennet has given up the search and the disgraced family's being run out of town that he decides to take action himself. And another thing that has always bothered me, in fact something that I remember getting upset about when I saw this movie for the first time when I was younger, is how they changed Lady Catherine's final scene. She shows up at Longbourn to make Elizabeth promise not to marry Darcy. Okay, but then it turns out she did so at his request. He's out waiting in the carriage while she tests the waters for him. What? Plus, later Darcy explains that Lady Catherine, who openly disliked her before, likes Lizzie now because her rudeness is a welcome change from continual flattery. Huh, I'd more easily believe this if I'd seen any evidence of it. It's an amusing plot twist, but none of it makes sense to me for this story. Plus, it makes things come together a little too easily, a little too comically in the end. Ultimately, I would say that the 1940 version is not an overwhelmingly faithful adaptation. It does hit the marks, but reaches them in a roundabout way at times. But it is an entertaining enough film, not something that I would watch repeatedly, but something that is worth seeing at least once, especially if you already like old movies and are familiar with the actors. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm not sure which one I'll look at next or when that will be, but it is somewhere on the distant horizon. Do let me know if you have any thoughts on this version, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks for watching!